Okay, great. So I'm Itamar Friedman, the CEO and the co-founder of Qodo, formerly Codium AI. We just rebranded together with announcing about our Series A, but it's not the main topic for today. We're not here to talk about Qodo. We're here to talk about how we can use model to solve complex code, and actually can they solve complex code these days. We're going to talk about the first generation of LLMs. Like I'm talking about GPT 3.5 and 4, etc. And then we're going to evolve to the newer models. I'm talking about O1 and maybe also Sonnet 3.5, the new one. Is there any connection between the two? We're going to discuss that shortly. Then we're going to try to put, thinking frameworks in place, because that's what we're actually asking models to do these days. We started by like simple classification. We moved on looking forward, especially to reasoning. And then we're going to take like one specific use case, which is called code contest. It's a problem-solving competition for programmers, and then we're gonna talk about like OpenAI O1 models, also IOI, if you're familiar, that they train specifically for this use case. And then we're going to use the thinking framework that we established before, like in the beginning of the talk, and discuss how well is O1 thinking to solve a problem, and is AlphaCodium, which is a work done by Qodo, can give us some hint about what really is happening and what type of thinking framework O1 is actually doing. Okay, so that's what we want to do. And again, please ask me anything. You can also ask me about Qodo. It's better to ask specifically about what I'm talking about. But if I have a question about Qodo, like the one I see, I will address this eventually in the right place and or at the end. Okay, so let's start with simply talking about LMs in general. So I guess like most people are already familiar what are large language models. They take an input, usually natural language, just an example, or code, which is more formal language. Then they tokenize it, and then they try like vectorize it, if you like putting it in a way that is a formal way to inject into an LLM, and then they try to from the learned patterns to generate some output. And when we're talking about code, these patterns are learned usually from open source repo as a training data, and LLM have very good predictive capabilities in code generation. It's not just by chance that, Copilot, for just an example, one of the early use cases of AI tools along ChatGPT, is because predicting lines of code, the next token, etc., is probably like a very good use cases for LLMs and code. Like if you think about it, if you have like a few lines of code and you just want to complete a few more lines, probably like an LLM that was trained on trying to predict the next token, the next sentence is a good fit. Okay, but at the same time, you know what, just before I do that, like basically the way they work, they have like a sequence to sequence type of mechanism where they try to with an attention-based mechanism to try to consider the entire input all at once. I'm simplifying things. That's one of the advancement of this field with the all attention is all you need paper, with this transformer that is capable to look almost like with an attention model on the entire input output and predict the next token sequence to sequence. Basically, we claim that it's often relies on the surface level patterns of the training data. It happens to be that the surface level patterns is a lot. Like you can predict in a certain line what is the next token, then probably you do have some understanding of what's going on in the previous token. So there is some level of understanding. It's more on the surface, but there is some level of understanding. Having said that, there's a lot of limitations for, we will call it the first generation of LLM. It's quite misleading. But just for the sake of this discussion, let's say that GPT 3.5 and 4 is the first generation of LLM, then there is a heavy limitation on handling complex challenges, on overfitting. Like some people said, it's like you're getting the average, if you're asking something, you're getting the average response from the internet, just an example. So, and it's hard to, for example, if you focus on code problems, to maintain consistency in their results on their code suggestion. Just an example, I'm talking about the LLM, not products. Products might try to, handle this situation like we do at Qodo or Copilot. We're two different products, but I'm not going to talk about it today, but just giving an example. And for example, dealing, with error handling, debugging, code review in general. By the way, I don't know if you're familiar, if you read the internet, you see that code diffs, like changes in code plus minus, models are not so good. So there, by the way, this could be because of the training data, but there are other reasons for that. So despite their impressive power, and we were all amazed in November 23, right, with ChatGPT, there are still like substantial problems and limitations dealing with, let's call it, enterprise level code. When you're trying to deal with, like, with code that is like 5-page website or some demo snake or something like that, we already see like amazing stuff happening out there. But when you're trying to deal with complex code, it's still very challenging. Now now recently we saw the advancement of new models, right? Do they solve this problem? Do we see any, like, some of these limitations, some of these barriers being totally removed? Let's discuss. That's part of the reason that we're here. So OpenAI released O1. By the way, there's a few versions of it. Maybe we'll get to talk about it. And Claude released a new version of Sonnet 3.5. By the way, kind of, you're the first to hear about it. Please expect Qodo to start providing these models. You can choose between O1 and Sonnet, the new 3.5, etc. It's coming really, really soon. It's really exciting because, with all respect to GPT-4o, for example, there are better ways to solve some of the problems. So you're going to see that soon. So let's talk about these models. So first, I want to specifically focus on what Greg, one of the chiefs from OpenAI, said about O1. So he said, like, he wrote like quite a big post about it, and he doesn't do that often, so it probably very like meaningful for him. And one thing he said, that one way to think about it, that our models do system one thinking. Like, he's talking about our models like first generation that I mentioned, supposedly first generation. But now the models are actually unlocking system two thinking. So they see it like a big breakthrough. And this is something that we're going to talk about today, okay? We're going to relate to the breakthrough, to the system two thinking, and etc. And then quite very different language was being used when you talk about the announcement by Anthropic, Claude. They also talked about, the multi-step, the reasoning capabilities that they pushed, they tried to improve in Sonnet, and specifically for code. They actually talked a lot, as you can see there here in this announcement, on how there is significant leap in AI-powered coding. So did we solve all these limitations that we just talked about? Okay, by the way, I'm a bit worried that although I see quite a lot of people, I don't see questions yet. Please do ask me anything about experience with O1, Sonnet. Again, I'm not necessarily going to answer immediately. I'll find the right place, but I'm actually open with the chat. I hope it doesn't block your view. Please write me if it does. Okay, so as I mentioned, Greg talked about like system 1 and system 2, and I want to relate to that because this is extremely important to me. I'm talking about this stuff for a year now, and it's great to see like other dudes like also relating to it recently. So I don't know if you're familiar, system 1, system 2. Mostly the person who I think brought this terminology to the world is Daniel Kahneman. Unfortunately, he passed away, like, I think last year. His legacy is amazing, Nobel Prize winner. And he talked about like thinking fast and slow. That's the name of the book, by the way, if you want to read. I also recommend, if you like this book, to read Noise by him. Also, like, really eye-opening, although it's a bit heavy, like reading everything, but it's still worthwhile. Noise, also by Daniel Kahneman. And he's talking about system 1 and system 2, where in system 1 is very fast, reactive, like intuitive, very heuristic driven, with a lot of biases. By the way, that's what he talked about in Noise. A repetitive task, like driving after a while, after you drive for 10 years, and quite automatic, reflexes. And that's why it's also very error prone. I'm not saying that system 2 is not error prone, but okay, we'll talk about it very soon. And then system 2 thinking is much slower, more analytical, methodical, as I mentioned, slower decision making, complex problems, autonomous-ish. We're going to talk about it a little bit soon. And I claim also environment, where I'm allowing myself to consider your developers, or so I shortcut to environment aware. And I want to suggest another framework or another terminology, system 1.5. And that's something in between, and we're going to talk about it a bit later. I'm claiming it as like a glorified system 1, like a chain of thought, if you like. If you're from the field, we talked a lot about chain of thought in late 23, early 24, like, long chain, chaining a few inferences one after another in a logical way, a react, if you're familiar. It's a framework to think, connect inferences, in a thoughtful way. Okay, so that's what system, in my opinion, system 1.5, if I project it on AI. And while I don't think that chain of thought is necessarily still a deep deliberative reasoning reinforced by validation process, okay, remember that, and relevant thinking frameworks and tools, including devising and choosing between options, etc. So we're going to talk about it now, but I just want to remind you that at the same time, like you would find Greg talking about System 2, but also in OpenAI blog posts, they were talking about chain of thoughts. So for me, it's a bit of a larting, because I don't think like per se chain of thought is System 2. For example, what I'm doing in front of you right now, in my opinion, is a chain of thought. Like I'm kind of trying to think my next sentence. I'm not purely, I'm almost like half of what I'm doing, let's admit, it's System 1. I'm almost like predicting the next token myself. I try to think about it when you talk to people, but sometimes like I'm stopping, I'm trying to think, what is the message that I'm trying to say in this slide? I want to remember and make sure I'm saying that, etc. So that's like a chain of thought. It's a bit more like than a System 1, like immediately saying what I've had in mind, but it's still, I don't think I'm doing any System 2 thinking. Maybe preparing for the slides was some of the System 2 thinking. Okay, so I want to double down on that before I go to talk about O1 model and showing maybe like a very simple demo and things like that. Again,
Hey, Tamar, sorry to interrupt you. There are some questions, but they're not in the chat. They're in the
got it.
Q&A. They're
Okay,
in the
got it.
Q&A, so you can check them out there.
Okay, got it. 1 second. I don't like I'm clicking the Q&A section. Doesn't bump like immediately visible to us. Can you write them? Any chance you can copy them
Sure, I'll copy them in the
to the
chat.
chat? Just so I
Yep,
have one place to see everyone. I hope it
absolutely.
makes
You got
sense.
it.
Thank you so much. Okay, so while this is happening, this is a diagram. I please apologize. Please accept my apology for this simple diagram. You could claim that this is a high-level architecture for any system in the world. Input, system, output. Okay, but there's something special about Gen AI architecture, that the space, the field is not so clear. It's like sometimes you get a vague prompt, and the output is maybe not so clear. That's what I think like kind of special with the Gen AI tools, like ChatGPT, for example. Okay, and usually System 1 thinking means that you collect some context. You can, as a tool, you can collect some context. I don't know if you noticed, like ChatGPT, for example, now has some memories of what you wrote in the past, and if you ask something, it might collect that, and then it prompts a model and gives you an output. It needs to be cheap to some extent. It is useful to get these. Okay, like System 1 thinking is useful. Like I use it to try to speak fluent and drive and whatever. Like most of my life, I guess, our life, I guess, is System 1, right? Great. But the thing is that that's what we talked about. It's really prone, it's prone to errors, and there's so much research saying that there is a reason why the code that is generated doesn't really work. I'm not saying it's not useful, but if you just let it spit code, you won't get it accomplished. As a developer, you're fixing a lot of the code suggestion you're getting from tools like Qodo or Copilot. You're fixing the code there, even if it helps you a lot. And System 1.5 thinking means that in addition to some context collection, there is some chained inference with, it could be even with tools. I'm not saying not. Maybe like it's like almost an agentic, like it chains like a few thoughts, maybe even using some tools that were pre-configured. Like that you said, hey, I want to use these tools for this kind of task. Just an example. And maybe even because you're doing a chain of thought, maybe part of the chain could also be configured to help the user to refine the input or even verify the output, etc. But that's not like let's call it, it's not a bonus for System 2 thinking. The entire idea of System 2 thinking, that it's like an environment aware agent, like us as people, we are aware. We are aware that we have an environment, that we are able to collect information, that we have tools. The tools might vary. I might not have the tool. And as a System 2 thinker, I might even say, I'm missing a tool. I cannot accomplish this task. Okay, just as an example. And I would love, as a developer, I am always mad on my product manager if they don't, sorry, I am sometimes angry if the product manager didn't provide me the proper input, right? So that's like how I see system two thinking. And now with this framework, I'm going to like jump and get to the point on talk about O1 and AlphaCodium, etc. But just before that, I'm stopping for the question finally, and please don't hesitate to ask more. So somebody asked me, you mentioned that there is great result with, like, let's call it first generation with simple code, less sophisticated, like enterprise grade, complex old code where, you know, it's very hard companies to deal with. They don't understand and they can't upgrade modern architecture, etc. How do you see this being solved? If training the models open source repo or not doing the job, etc. Okay, so if I got it correctly, someone is saying, yeah, I get you, Itamar. Yeah, these models work for simple code, but maybe even simple tasks are not working well with large code bases that with like old legacy code, etc. By the way, like I think every code after a week is a legacy code, but let's put it aside, as I think it's almost a half a sad, funny joke. And here is my answer. And sorry, it also asks if fine-tuning the model. So actually, I think fine-tuning could be a problem, because if you think about fine-tuning, what it means fine-tuning a model on a code base is actually adopting. It's like if you don't do anything special with the fine-tuning, you might do a special fine-tuning, but that's really hard. I'm not going to talk about it unless you ask. And if you're going to do like simple fine-tuning, what the model is actually doing is like learning, hey, this is the biases I want to create. And then when you want to modernize the code, it's not necessarily going to help you to modernize. Maybe it will even help you to stick with the old one. So I'm not saying it's not possible, because if you do like special fine-tuning and you actually, as part of the instruction of the fine-tuning, you're giving instructions saying this is the old code, here's the old code, here's an example of a new code when you do have, for example, like find a second phase of the fine-tuning, etc., you might actually be able to exploit fine-tuning. But the way we think about it is actually related to the continuation of the talk, is that in addition or instead of this specialized fine-tuning, you kind of need to have a system that is more aware, like a system 1.5 or a system 2 that is more aware that you are having a task of modernizing. And this tool will help prompting and ragging, like fetching relevant information and thinking about the modernization. By the way, I'm not saying that modernization is solved. We are doing at Qodo, helping, there's a Fortune 100, like they refactor entire code base with us. And I know that Amazon Q, for example, they're like messaging is a lot about like we help to refactor, modernize, etc. I'm not saying there aren't these tools, but I can tell you that I don't think there are any tool that like you click a button and modernize. So I don't think that system 2 full complete tool like people actually exist right now, but there are tools that is more like of a system, rather like system 1.5, let's say, at least, rather one that should help with modernization. And I love to if you talk about it privately later. People are asking about security and data, etc. So these are like it's a really a large range of points, items related to security. You're talking about where the models run. Are they on, for example, Qodo hosted or on-prem? Who is the model owner? Is it Qodo? I'm sorry, I'm using us as an example, but it's true for others. Is it Qodo model or OpenAI or Sonnet, etc.? And what data, for example, I know you talk about security, but I'm talking about also privacy. What data was used? So these are, for example, 3 dimensions. And some companies like Qodo actually has like almost a tick on each one of those. Like I can tell you that it's maybe surprising or not, different enterprise have different like requirement. So some actually do prefer some setup that you would find maybe like weird. We have almost all the deployment option that I just mentioned, on-prem, not on-prem, our models, others, a different type of training, etc. So you should just be aware of this dimension and ask your coding assistant provider. O1 and Sonnet are great, but not local enough. Any on-prem options being seriously investigated? Yeah, definitely. I can tell you, I just came, like, I don't know if anyone you know this, I joined the meeting 1 minute before this demo, so before this webinar, because I came from a Fortune 100 company that was giving us statistics about our Qodo, and they They present us how many hours saved, how many problems were found. Like we're like just sitting there and listening. And I can tell you that our model that is provided on-prem is very on par. I can tell you that is better. And I think like Sonnet, the new one, for example, and O1 are amazing models. But sometimes specific companies like Qodo, but there's others, can fine-tune their models for specific cases, even with reasoning capabilities, etc., to fine-tune them for specific tasks. So I don't think like Qodo models will answer on financial or marketing tasks like other models, but maybe actually Qodo has data and relevant like training processes that is can get really good models. So we didn't yet release any information about our model, but meanwhile, I'll suggest you to read about Qodo 2.5. And just an example, there are others, but if you want to check just an example to read about and see like good models for coding, I would check Qodo 2.5. There's a new model that coming soon from them that is really good. And they already released, but there's others. Okay, last one, and then I'm going to continue. Is there any plan to support GitLab on premise according to Qodo? Yeah, so this is like very specific for Qodo, and I think maybe general, so I'll just answer a quick answer. Qodo, both Qodo Merge and Qodo Gen, other Qodo tools. We have different tools. We're not just AI Assistant on ID. We're also assisting other parts. Is actually supporting GitLab, Bitbucket, on-prem. We have plenty of GitLab. Actually, we're starting a collaboration because of that. We're talking about a collaboration with GitLab just because of that. It's not yet signed or anything. Okay, cool. Moving on. So let's finally get to the main topic. And thank you for asking all these questions. Please keep doing that. I'll ready to that in 10-15 minutes. Okay, so we're going to talk about OpenAI 01, maybe a bit about Sonnet, and in the context of a coding competition that was actually designed by DeepMind. And we're going to talk about Qodo open source work that you can go and download. We're going to hopefully push an update like very soon. And so if you're going to check AlphaCodium, I suggest like waiting a couple of days. You can already use it, etc., but you're going to get like a small revamp. And yeah, let's start. So first, let's take a look on 01 and with respect to the System 2 thinking. So you can see people talk about it. Like, for example, someone compared ChatGPT with 4.0 with 01 model. And he said like, yeah, it's much better, but it's still like hallucinating and it's still not, completely understanding like what we're doing. I actually saw a great meme that I forgot putting here. I forgot putting here, which you see like GPT-4 hallucinating immediately, and GPT 4.0.01 is doing a lot of thinking and then hallucinating at the end, like in a very, very, let's say, interesting way that meme was. So despite the chain of thought, the guided chain of thought is still like very, very, it's not necessarily grounded. It's not necessarily using like validation tool, thinking about the tool it will need. I'm not saying it's not going to get there. We can talk about it in the end. You can ask me a question about that, but it's not really there. I don't think it's the methodological is like very simple. It's a very shallow, etc. So I don't think we're inching closer to System 2. I do appreciate the jump that we're seeing here. It's handling much well structure. It's less hallucination, but it's still not there, like you can see here. And then to keep like thinking about it, like I want to give you more evidence because basically I just like hand waving right now. I wanted to introduce you the code contest competition. So basically the code contest competition is just problem solving competition. Let me show you for a second. So DeepMind were the first to introduce it with their AlphaCode work. Oh, sorry, by the way, just making sure, do you see my screen and not the presentation? Just to make sure if somebody can say.
Yeah,
Yes,
your
thank you so
screen.
much. Thank you. So you can see here like December 2022 by DeepMind AlphaCode, and they show here an example of the code contest competition. It's like as if you're back to 101 in the university, CS 101, and giving you like a problem and you need to solve it, but it's a bit harder than lead code. It's like more of lead code hard, if you like, and it's based on like a website on Codeforces competitive programming website where you have like ranking, etc. Okay, so that's the contest, and the interesting thing, very, very important thing, is that the data set does not hold the test set. You need to submit in order to get to the test set. Okay, that's important because it's harder. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's harder to overfit. Okay, and then AlphaCode then AlphaCode DeepMind submitted a solution. They got a good result, like very interesting back in the days. Then they submitted AlphaCode 2, and then like also Salesforce submitted a result, and they're all like really good. They're starting to get to like a master level. And then AlphaCodium, we released it this year. We got to like very close to master level. And then O1 reached to a master level, and then AlphaCodium, we reach even more than that. And that's what I want to talk about, okay? So AlphaCodium is basically, if I need to say it in a few words, is the concept for moving from prompt to flow engineering, okay? What it means is that a person has, a developer put a lot of efforts and using his or her thinking to design a system 1.5 system thinking algorithm. So a developer looked at the problem, used the system 2 thinking, the real system 2 thinking, to develop not a prompt, but a flow for a model to pass through a chain of thought that is really well guided. And that's the idea. So what you see here is the flow, which is very simple. You take a problem, like think about how would you solve that problem that I just gave you. It takes the problem, it tries to reflect on it, and each one of the nodes is like a call or at least one inference to an LLM. You take a problem, you reflect on it, and then you try to think, how would you test it? How do you test? And then you actually generate a few pseudocode solution. And then you rank those solutions. Then you actually generate more tests. All of this part, still no code generation, no running code or anything like that. Then the purple part is where you actually try to generate code, and then after doing that, try to reflect on that. I will show you, like, hopefully we still have, I see we have enough time to actually show a live demo. And then you start running the test, reflecting on that, and then iterating on AI generated test, which is one of the hardest problem. That's the only one I'm going to double click. And then finally, after your solution, actually running, passing the few examples. Each problem might come with 0 to a few example of how this problem should look like, the input output, then passing through the AI generated test, then the solution is being submitted. This is AlphaCodium. Now, if you're aware of O1, I didn't mention, but like very, very explicitly, but we talked about it in the beginning, O1, the idea, and I'm going to show you, like the idea that it's supposed to, like it's supposed to do this chain of thought by itself, okay? Now it's the time to understand it. Like supposedly you don't need to put this framework for O1 because it could do it by itself. So let's like see an example. So I took one of the problems, like actually just the first, because I want to know, like I want to try to have zero biases. By the way, you can blame me that I didn't put too much prompting here, but I think that's part of the idea of O1, that you don't want to have too much prompting when you're talking about O1, in my opinion. But we also tested with heavy prompting. So I gave it the first problem in the coding contest, and I asked it to work on it. So I don't know if you got to use O1, but basically it gives you an answer, and then you can, like, it took 74 seconds, which is plus minus what takes AlphaCodium to run, and then it tells you how it thought, like understanding the problem, implementing custom sorting, mapping out the starting position, adjusting my approach. You can see here a process. So right, so great. So like you have a system 1 thinking that somebody wrote me, like, is kind of hard coded, right? And you have a system 1 thinking that you have a system 1 thinking that sorry, I was thinking about ahead, rephrasing. You have a system 1.5, I claim, solution that is hard coded to some extent because somebody thought about it thoroughly. By the way, it's not specific for one problem, but it is a specific flow for this code contest. And then you have O1 model that by itself, it's a system 1.5 thinker. So who is going to beat who? Like who is going to be better? Right? That's one of the questions that we're going to think here. And if O1 is by far better, first, amazing. Second, maybe it's actually system 2 thinker, etc. By the way, I'm not coming with the exact answer. I want you guys, it's a topic that it's a bit like there is a framework for Daniel Kahneman, but it's still in discussions. Great. Just before I continue, I want to see if there are questions, and I did see some in the chat. So 1 second. Okay. This is time. Limitation of mathematical reasoning. Yeah, great. It's a great paper. How do you think to translate from math problem to coding problem. Okay, so I think like I'm gonna relate to that question in a second. Right, and right now we don't see the question, so I'm going to repeat them. Thank you, David. So somebody talked about Apple paper limitation of mathematical reasoning, and then like I'm trying to shorten the question. How do you see the connection between math problem to coding problem, and with related to an agent? What is a large problem? What is a small problem, etc.? How do you measure complexity? So the first thing, and sorry, the second question is the flow engineering is hard coded, correct? Are you investigating generating this flow using AI? And take a look of this paper. Thanks, Alak. I actually didn't know about this paper, but oh, Ilana, if you can open for everyone to write to everyone. Now I noticed that people are posting to hosts and panelists, and they're not posting for everyone. And by the way, people, maybe you do have this option. Just make sure to switch to everyone. And if you don't have this option, we'll try to enable that. But meanwhile, I'm reading.
Sorry, it should be fixed now. You guys hopefully can see.
Okay, thank you, David. Now I understand what you're saying. So please make sure to submit to everyone so people will look on it. So I'm going to try to relate to this question right now. So first of all, if you go to OpenAI blog, it's not the paper. I think they also have a more technical paper. You would see they're relating to O1, and they're talking about reasoning. They are talking about the chain of thought here. You see, like, which I appreciate. I think that's the better way to say what the LLM is doing. It's not like really system 2 that some people wrote. Sorry, like I love Greg, by the way, don't get me wrong. And I humbly saying that he's probably more correct than I am, but just sharing my opinion humbly. And then like they even call it like chain of thought, which I appreciate. And then they're talking about coding. Now, one of the interesting things, sorry, when although there is a coding and there is math, notice the interesting idea is that they're talking about the fact that they took a model that they trained on the Olympiad of informatics. Sorry, it's like they're talking about they took a model that is trained on mathematics, and then they used it also to on the coding problem. And interestingly, you can see that it does better on the Codeforces competition that I mentioned. Just to clarify, the code contest benchmark is the benchmark that is created by DeepMind from the Codeforces website competition, like that is ongoing. Okay, and you can see that there's a strong connection, in my opinion, between mathematics and coding, because a lot of the coding is like logic. And it's not just by chance, in my opinion, that OpenAI decided to, and also like Tropic decided to merge like their models. If you remember, there was Codex, and there was GPT-2 or whatever, right? And they merged it. I actually have a connection to the VP product there, and he's an investor in our Oregon company. And it's a lot about that programming and actually helping the generalize the model for better reasoning. And I think that that's the connection. Now, how do you measure complexity? Is it a lot of text, a lot of code, a lot of and a more complicated NP hard stuff, etc.? And sorry, I think that the answer is relatively straightforward. Like, I'm not saying that there's papers to be written about that, but probably both is correct. Like, supposedly the more information you have is probably has a correlation to complexity, but also the level of, there is like enough algorithms in mathematics and to measure complexity of algorithms and problems. So this is also related. So I think both of these like metrics, like the complexity in general and lengths are both related, and not only for the LLM, but also for tools, AI tools in general, but also for LLMs. With all the respect of the growing context, it's not yet solved the old needle in the haystack or other problems. Sorry if I'm too much technical. If you're not familiar, there are some benchmarks to check how models are dealing with long problems, and although they're starting to beat some specific test, and then like needle in a haystack, and then you come with two needles in a haystack or others, and then they break. Okay, so we're still not dealing with hard. Now, about the question about, by the way, I'm dealing with this question because I think they're really related to our topics, so that's why I'm elaborating. Thank you for someone's mentioned flow engineering, at least the way you presented it right now, Itamar, at least for AlphaCodium, was a very hard-coded problem, which is mostly correct. Like, I have one comment on that. We're going to get to that later. But what about if you want this flow to be more dynamic? Can you learn that? And he pointed to a paper. So actually, that's part of my point with system 2. So on one hand, we were expecting O1 that can build its own flow, right? Look at this like flow. Like if I try another problem, it will do a different flow. Supposedly it could do better. Okay. So I do believe in that self, but I believe, like, if you think about people, for example, we do have patterns of thinking as well. And we are aware of, classifying, for example, the problem. Okay, we classify the problem and we do fetch different frameworks. So while and then we're able to adjust them. That's the flexibility and the sophistication that I expect from System 2 thinking. So if we go back to so I believe that the methodology for System 2 to actually do what you're saying is like understanding the problem, understanding the environment, fetching relevant thinking frameworks. They might be supposedly hard-coded, and then on the fly being able to adjust them to even better fit the problem. Let me know if you don't think that's what you're actually doing when you're doing System 2. Maybe I'm too much like taking human way of thinking and applying it. But that's a part of what we're doing right now here. When Daniel Kahneman did System 1 and 2 thinking, he was mainly talking about human intelligence. And I think we still have way to go with artificial intelligence before you release it to only think on the embedding level. If you hear, like, for example, Jan LeCun, etc., like the future is like models are going to think only on the embedding level, and that's like a whole new thing that I'm not going to relate to right now. Yeah, I'm going to move on because time is starting to tick, and I have a few more things to show. But thank you for asking question, and please do continue. Okay, that's the idea of the webinar. So the only thing I want to double click here on the AlphaCodium is the test generation. Basically, someone could claim that if you are able to perfectly generate tests for a certain problem, you actually solve the problem and you actually solve software. If you agree on that, that's one of the reasons we actually built Qodo. We believe that the next generation of intelligent coding system would arise, would be created because there would be technology that will help us to automate test generation and code review. It's a freaking hard technology and problem. So I'm not saying that we're there. I'm not saying we'll solve it tomorrow. And I'm not saying like it's going to be fully automated next year. But the more you are able to automate that part of the testing and the code review, the more you can jump to the next level of code generation. That's what stands behind like Qodo and why we are here at all. So that's also why I'm going to double click on the test generation, which is the main reason why AlphaCodium, one of the main reasons why AlphaCodium like beats all others. And finally, I'm going to get to the results, okay, if you didn't see them until today. So we are talking about like basically if I have to, I would say like test generation, a test-driven framework, what you see here. Although the test is only a certain part of this framework, it's very test-driven solution generation. And let's talk about the test generation. So what do you see here right now on the frame? So let's say that we took one of the problems from the code contest, and let's say we got an oracle that will give us a solution. Let's visualize this solution as the blue cloud, just as an example. Now, if we take the problem and provide it to GPT-4o, Sonata 3.5, even GPT-01, they would create a very plausible solution that will look quite good. The green one, what you see on the left, the green cloud. But software either works and pass tests or not. And in many cases, you're going to see the result, it will not pass the tests. Okay, so it's plausible, it looks good, but it's not working. By the way, this is different than marketing materials. That, what is a working marketing materials? You need to connect like feedback loop, like different, like an image. If you generate images, I want a porcupine riding a horse in the moon behind. There's so many options that you would find plausible, likable. So, but in code, there are also options, but it either works or not. So let's move on. In the middle, what you're seeing, you're seeing is what happens is if we also consider some examples. Here's an input and an output example. Then what is going to happen is that the solution, whether, by the way, it's a chain of thought like O1, okay, like O1, which is doing a chain of thought and considering it, or whether it's like direct prompting or so, even if it's iterating, it will probably, that's what we see from our research, it will actually optimize overfit for these specific tests. We call them public tests because this is how they're called in the code contest competition data set. They were given the entire like a big part of the it's not a secret sauce because it's out there, the sauce of AlphaCodium is generating additional tests. Now, the thing is that it's a freaking hard task. First, the test needs to be meaningful. For example, edge cases are very important. And then they need to be relatively accurate. And also, you can't always be accurate about the test cases that you're generating. We can talk about only that for an hour. I guess it's intuitive, like that it's not that easy to generate the right test. And how do you handle those bad cases? This is exactly where like knowledge, not tools can be injected, and human knowledge that are not well, let's say, engineered or sorry, not well presented in a chain of thought can come in, like just regular algorithm right now works better. Okay, when you take a look on our code and how we designed this, yes, there's a lot of LLMs going on here, but also some regular algorithm and other piece of software and running the test, etc., and using tools that were designed here. Okay, and that's something that the models, even if they're a chain of thought, are not doing well enough. I'm not saying that they can't. Like eventually you can imagine a world, and I'm maybe not going to answer today if I believe it's possible, that imagine a world where the model is going to say, hey, I have to generate tests. Hey, I have to use it. Oh, I'm pulling like the relevant tool. Oh, I think that I need this algorithm to run, which I can't run it in my LLM. Let's run this algorithm as a tool and then like choose if the test is good or not, etc. It's not like unthinkable of maybe the models can reach to what I'm calling system 2, but right now they're not, and I think there are reasons to think where there's still a large gap to get there, and you're going to get it only from a solution, and you're not going to get it directly from a model. It's we can talk about it if we have time at the end, but this is one of the important part of AlphaCodium. And then when you look on the results, now what I'm showing you on the x-axis are different models, and there is direct prompting or using that model inside AlphaCodium, okay? And on the y-axis is the accuracy. Now we're talking about like if I just to let you know. Let's see if I have this paper in front of me. I need AlphaCode 2, AlphaCode 2. I need AlphaCode 2, this one. Okay, this is the AlphaCode 2 paper. Just to let you know, if you reach to 50% accuracy, you're in the 87th percentile of the competitors. Okay, you're 87% of the competitors, and now considering that, and I'm going to look on the question very soon. Okay, when you look on that, you can see, for example, that AlphaCodium with let's focus on the middle, for example, AlphaCodium with GPT-4 Turbo getting 48% accuracy, which means it's around 85% comparing to humans competing on this coding competition. And you can see how AlphaCodium helps GPT-4 Turbo like boost its performance. By the way, we didn't release yet the new result for Sonat 3.5, the new one. For some reason, like Sonat 3.5 is not doing better than GPT-4o. We actually expected it to do because we know Sonat 3.5 is really good in coding. But here is like a combination of coding and reasoning for this problem. And we do expect that Sonat 3.5, the new one, which is not the one you see here, would actually get really good result comparing, for example, to 4.0. But the interesting thing is that you can see that O1 Mini actually does quite well comparing, for example, to AlphaCodium versus AlphaCodium using GPT-4o. So you can understand like that there is or even not only comparing to GPT-4o, but even doing quite well for AlphaCodium using GPT-4o. So there is a meaningful jump here of the reasoning and the processes, and that's why I do give it the credit to jumping to 1.5. At the same time, the jump between 53 to 74 is huge, because the more you solve, rephrasing, usually the first problem that are being solved are the easier ones. So if you solve 50% more of the problems, you probably solved the harder problems that were not solved before. This is a huge jump. So it means that O1 is really, really good, like becoming really good solving like 85% like doing it by itself, but it's becoming really good solving small tasks, like really, really small, like reflecting on the problem, generating pseudocode, generating the test, like thinking in small quantas of problems becomes so good that it pushes AlphaCodium to the roof. And we didn't get yet to our hands on O1 and O1 IOI, but just for your information, the O1 preview with AlphaCodium is doing slightly better than the O1 IOI. So O1 preview with AlphaCodium doing better than O1 IOI show again like how this idea of that the models are not yet there. Even system 1.5 thinking, is not maybe yet there, and definitely not the system 2, where you have a hard-coded system designed by a human that's thought as a system 2 thinker. Okay, great. I'm stopping here for a few questions. I'm looking for a developer to use AlphaCodium. Okay. The differentiation between public and private test is brilliant, especially combined with the test coverage feedback loop. I'm a long-time fan of test-driven development, so AlphaCodium makes a lot of sense to me. I just need to work on complex input like JSON file, not a trivial inputs of coding competition. Okay, I will move your question to a bit of your statement to a question, please. So you mentioned that, hey, with all the respect, Itamar, you're showing here coding contest competition. Okay, it starts doing better than human. Okay, we didn't maybe believe that in 3 years, maybe even 1 year ago. But with all the respect, these are simple tasks. Exactly, I agree. Do not think that AlphaCodium, if you go, you can go play with it already. It's so easy to run and install. The instructions are here. We need to update the graphs and everything, that it will actually work for your enterprise software. It will not. Okay, it will not work on complex code. For that, it's going to be complicated. You're going to see us offering AlphaCodium as a product only in 2025. There's so many reasons. I'm going to share only a few. When you're thinking about simple coding problems, you basically, it's enough to have a really good unit testing capabilities, which I'm not saying that they're perfect or far from perfect, but we're already quite good at code. But when you're thinking about complex enterprise code, you need to think about testing for code that talks with the databases, that it has UX UI, that has calling many API calls outside of your code, etc. And if you get like, it's part of I'm revealing here some of the works that were still not, it's still in stealth. Like, we need to deal with all of these, and this is very, very complicated. Otherwise, you cannot really do this process because it will just like break the loops. Okay, I guess Devin. Okay, so you know what I mean. Like so these agents that we see out there, they work for Upwork stuff, but they not work for enterprise code. It's going to be complex. And just one more thing, that there's still room to combine a few concepts. For example, Meta just released another paper of there, a new paper. It's like, it's new, it's from October, and they talked about taking a model. They talked about taking a model and actually training it to think like the O1 model, okay, but specifically for code. So think about it that as if they trained the model, an O1 model, but very focused on coding stuff. And how did they do that? They called reinforcement learning on code execution, on executed code output. Okay, so they use that output of running the code and iterating on it to, and then you can see it does better. It does better than AlphaCodium GPT-4. But the thing is that if you will take their model, we didn't get the chance like to get their model, but if you take their model and put in AlphaCodium, it will still work better, I'm quite sure. And you can see, for example, AlphaCodium on O1, which they didn't have access to because we released our work like a few days after theirs. But I think that there's a room for combining all of these techniques, and it kind of rounds up some of your question from the beginning. There could be a useful scenario where you train a model on some code, on some process, fine-tune it. You even fine-tune it for reasoning, etc. But still, if you will use a well-designed flow designed by a human to wrap up this code that is specific for that task. And that's what we do at Qodo. We have many flows. Here I talked about the AlphaCodium flow, but we have many flows that we provide in our product, each one of them designed to do a specific thing, so it will still work much better. And I claim that even when we will have the models fine-tuned for this, for the specific code, or fine-tuned for reasoning, or fine-tuned to be adaptive, for to think about the framing as they go, which some of the people here suggested me to relate to. I think still we will have human designing those systems, at least for a while. And that's how I'm going to leave this call for this time. And maybe there's will be another one about how we predict the future in 5 to 10 years from now. But I want to be very practical and talk about what I think you came here to see, which is 2024, 2025. Yeah, so that's it. We're on 1 minute, and I just want to thank you all for being here with me for a full hour, listening about AlphaCodium, O1 model, Sonnet, the system thinking theory framework of 1.5. 2, you can find us as Qodo AI on X, Twitter, and LinkedIn, on our Discord, and we're happy to chat. We'll try to be responsive. So it's not only here, we have our Git repositories that you can reach us out. Again, thank you very much, and have a very good day, evening, wherever you are around the world. Thank you.